I think not enough podcasts, especially in our industry, talk about these things. When you start a business, we pour everything into it. And so after spending 4 or 5 years to build a business and then shut it down within a matter of pretty much a year, it's very emotionally difficult.
I just think so much of our identity can be wrapped up in the businesses we start and the time and energy we put into them.
As business owners, it's really easy for us to get caught up in the day-to-day. What I learned is you have to have systems for growth.
Why are you so comfortable with technology? And why have you put such a priority on it?
Technology plays a massive role in today's modern world in business, and you need it to multiply yourself. Because if you didn't have the technology stack, you're not going to meet the level of service that clients are looking for today. The rate at which things change is so fast, and you need the ability to be able to keep up, adapt, and stay ahead.
Expert advice, practical tips, real-life stories. Have less stress, more time, and more money in your business. Welcome to the Cash Flow Contractor.
Martin, one of the coldest experiences of my life was getting off a train in Minnesota in the middle of January. I want to know what your coldest experience was. You've been around.
1971, I was in Moscow. Seriously.
I had no idea.
Was in January on Red Square. It was minus 40 centigrade, which happens to cross, it would be the same. That's where they cross. It's minus 40 Celsius or Fahrenheit too.
Yeah.
And you could spit and your spitball would hit the pavement and bounce because it was a frozen ice ball. So that's how we entertained ourselves, walking around Moscow spitting on the ground.
That's hilarious.
Anyway,
well, our guest today,
story.
Victor, is from Minnesota. Victor, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah,
thanks for having me. I would agree with that. I've definitely had some cold days where you could spit and it would be frozen before it hits the ground.
Yeah. You got to have that experience.
Yeah.
Goodness. Well, man, we're excited for this episode. We got to meet through Alex Weeks, who I believe we're having on the show probably just a few weeks after this. So that'll be exciting as well. But why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners? You're a remodeler in the Denver area, but that's not necessarily where you started. So maybe why don't we just start? Who are you and how did you get into construction?
Yeah. Again, thanks for having me on the show today. My name's Victor Lebegue, and I'm the owner of Yale Builders, where my team and I are dedicated to elevating our clients' everyday living experience through expertly crafted remodels. I first started my construction business back in 2018 when I was unexpectedly laid off from an independent contractor position working for General Motors. And my background, and while I was working full-time jobs, I always had my hands in construction, whether it was helping my dad as a kid growing up, working for a local family friend, roofing houses in the summer, or building apartment buildings out in North Dakota and doing side projects while I was working full-time. And at that time, when I got laid off, I was also starting to get pretty interested in investment real estate and had spent quite a bit of time networking with local real estate investors and realtors and things of that nature. And so when I got laid off, essentially, I did not want to go back to the automotive industry. So I seeked out some investors who had some projects going on and needed someone to do them, and kind of just started out by myself, swinging the hammer, doing everything, learning how to estimate projects. And it was all, the business side was very new to me. I was very good as a craftsman, essentially, with experience from doing things over the years. And then from there, I quickly realized I was working for investors and hiring employees, and we were doing both small scale and large scale remodel projects. And I learned that there wasn't really any money in it if I wanted to have W-2 staff that, got paid well and I could give benefits to, and also, pay myself a livable wage. And towards the end of one year, I was pretty much running out of money between every pay period, even though we were slammed. And so something had to change. And I happened to stumble across Michael Stone's books, Markup and Profit and Profitable Sales. And I devoured all the information in them. And that's the one, Martin. I think I think there's a newer one, Markup and Profit Revisited. So I think you have the original.
Yeah, that one's from 1998, but he has a lot of good. Anyway, he's got a lot of good
He
philosophy.
really does.
Go ahead.
If I've learned anything, it's if I didn't implement it and I ignored it, I definitely learned it the hard way later. So I think there's a lot of good insight in those books. And when I learned about Michael Stone's, design build methods, I had some knowledge of what design build was, and I knew I wanted to be a remodel contractor because I've always been interested in the problem solving behind it and really just being able to like see the process from start to finish. And I love woodworking and millwork and things like that. So I started implementing the design build process, and I took a big risk and invested in an office. And then from there, just started focusing on building systems and a team to work with that were good at the things that I wasn't.
Wow. Pretty quick trajectory. So you're in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, how did you get to Colorado? Let's just start there.
Yeah. So Colorado wasn't planned. Like, I was not looking for a second location. Things were actually going extremely well in Minnesota. We had grown to roughly 3 million in revenue. We were making, 12 to 14% net profit at the time. Like things were pretty decent. And I happened to do a lot of networking on, local and nationwide contractor Facebook groups. And I had an owner of a company out here in Colorado reach out to me kind of looking for advice. And I'm the type of person that I always want to do things 110%. Like I'm in this to be bigger than just myself. And I want to carry that through our business model. And so the conversation quickly turned into him looking to sell because it really was the only option that made sense for him. He wanted to, spend more time at home with his family. He wasn't good at systems. Like, he didn't really know about construction. He started it as a tile backsplash company and then turned into like a remodeler, but just had limited knowledge and also wasn't a very good manager of people either. And so the size they were was very similar to ours. And after looking at the numbers, I started thinking like, construction is a very hands-on business model. Like, most of your staff have to be hands-on, but it doesn't really have to be. If you think about office management and accounting, like, there's a lot of back-end office things that can be cross-utilized. So I started looking at this from a perspective of like, all right, if we're doing this much revenue, what can these employees do for both locations rather than just one? And the numbers made sense and actually reduced our overhead costs and in my opinion at the time would have put us on a trajectory to be able to expand and grow faster and implement faster systems. So a week after that conversation, I basically booked a plane ticket, came out, checked out the business with my boots on the ground, and decided to roll forward with it.
Okay. So you moved forward with it, and this is how long ago?
So this was a little over 2 years ago. August, actually 2 years and a month to the day. Which is interesting for this.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think too, like, a big part of me, I was also feeling pretty like stagnant in Minnesota. It's no secret, it's cold, it's dark and dreary in the winters, and the very beautiful state. But I felt like, my personal life was kind of suffering from the things that I really wanted to be doing. So the active lifestyle in Colorado and the mountains really, really appealed to me at the time too.
Khalil, maybe not today, but I'd like to mark this down to maybe get you on again and talk about the negotiations and what you went through to price and buy that business. That's of keen interest. It's not on software, but let's mark that down, Khalil.
Well, and Martin, if I learned anything, through that process, just because you have a CPA and an attorney and a banker and all these people working for you, they're not going to tell you what's best. So I think it's important, if anyone's looking to ever do an acquisition, they need to learn what that process is like.
Well, everybody is at least paying lip service to it or selling. So in the future, Khalil, but let's get that down. That we can't let that pass.
No, that's a great point.
Not get you on to talk about it.
Yeah. So before we jump into kind of the software side of things, I want to hear kind of the challenges of the two different locations. It's not like you were in, this side of the metro and then the other side of the metro,
Right.
or even like the city that's drivable.
Yeah.
You really chose some pretty different locations in Minnesota and Colorado.
Yeah.
So what were some of the challenges of managing those two locations? And then what ultimately led you to change directions?
Yeah, definitely. So starting with the ups, like the excitement of just having two locations was obviously huge. But I would say the rate at like which you can learn and try and test things, it and the speed of that process is amazing. Like it's just so fast at how quickly you can learn through that process, because you can try something at one location, maybe for a process or a software or just a shift in direction, and kind of A/B test. I would definitely say challenges are, at that size, we just weren't big enough to have the management team that I really needed. And at the time prior to leaving, like I felt I had the team in place. And of course I had my concerns, like anyone would. But I purposely, prior to coming to Colorado, like I stepped out of day to day and I didn't even go into the office for a few months just to like dry run and see what my challenges were going to be before coming out to Colorado. And things worked really well. But I quickly, learned that my team was not cut out for the task without me around. And one of the biggest impacts was so I run on EOS. I don't know if you're familiar. But I had an integrator working for me, and, she was my right hand, and she lasted 5 months after the acquisition, before it was like too much for her. And she'd also really alienated like my staff in Minnesota and just did a lot of like shady things after I had left. So I learned kind of the hard way that, like, in EOS, you talk about hiring and firing around core values and things like that. And, really kind of like learned how to dive into that a little bit deeper.
We need to say, I think a lot of people know, but that's Entrepreneur Operating System, Gino Wicken, Traction, and it's a system. Anyway, just so people, if they didn't know.
And I think it's a great system. Like, it's allowed me to go pretty far, I would say, and really learn how to structure things within the company. With that said, additional challenges were learning a completely different market. Colorado, we're near Denver, but we don't service Denver primarily, at least for now. So we're working in foothills, and it's really the Wild West up here. So like licensing is different. Building codes are a little more relaxed in some ways and more intense in others. So learning and navigating those things, because the previous owner didn't have much prior construction knowledge, like they weren't really pulling permits for most of their projects. And they were also doing, smaller scale projects. And then secondly, I would say, when I came to Colorado and I had both locations, I had already had a bunch of systems and processes and softwares built out that I thought I would just be able to kind of plug and play in this new location. And I quickly, learned that our processes were way too complex for running in multiple states. So I could honestly probably go on with a pretty large list on, challenges that came from that time.
Hey, where in Colorado, not Denver, what
Lakewood.
towns? North of Denver?
So
Lakewood?
we're, I think, technically east of Denver, and we stick on this side.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you made the decision to finish that location. What was that like? The Minnesota location?
Yeah. So shutting down, definitely a hard decision. I would say it took a lot, to make that decision. Obviously, when you start a business, we often put everything, we pour everything into it. And so after spending, 4 or 5 years to build a business and then shut it down within a matter of like pretty much a year, it's very emotionally, difficult. I would say if I learned anything throughout that process, it's made me a better business owner, because at the end of the day, like, I made the decision to do it for the greater good and mission of what we're doing here. And so I don't ever really look at failures as like a failure. But
Yeah.
to kind of get a little bit more into what it was like, essentially, I showed up one day and let the whole team go. I did not give them a notice. So that's very hard too, because it's staff that you care about a lot. And from there, I have a very strong moral compass. I don't want to let clients down. I don't like letting employees down. So we had active projects going at the time, but I didn't necessarily have the cash reserves to keep staff on until they were all done and fully finished. And at that
Yeah.
point, projects were taking too long to get done anyways. So I ended up leaving my business in Colorado, and luckily I have a great team here. So things run really well without me if I need to leave. But I was there for probably 3 months, just project managing, getting things finalized out, making sure everything was paid up, putting down our office and getting all that stuff kind of taken care of. And then I actually had to go back this spring to finish a couple other things out there. So
Wow.
I would definitely say if I had to do it over again, I would have made the decision faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough. And I think there's a lot of, I mean, I want to hear from your perspective, the entrepreneurial side of
Yeah.
it as the business owner. What are the emotional implications of it? I just think so much of our identity can be wrapped up in the businesses we start and the time and energy we put into them. And
Yeah.
even just feeling value from those, and getting our worth from that.
Yeah.
What was that like for you? And what did you learn about yourself through that process?
Definitely. I would say that I learned that more of my self-worth is tied up into the day-to-day of what I do than I thought. I
Yeah.
had kind of a full-on like identity crisis for a bit. I was just like, what am I doing? And I would say I'm still kind of struggling with that a little bit. Like I know where I want my companies to go, but I'm having trouble. Like my confidence was shattered throughout that process, right? And so
Yeah.
I had a lot of trouble after that trying to decide, like, is this what I want to do long term? Am I good enough to do this? Am I serving my staff really well? Um, and just kind of feeling like an overall failure. But then I realized, like, as business owners, it's really easy for us to get caught up in the day to day. And I think it's extremely important to set aside time to take that like 1,000-foot view and get up above the weeds and see what's kind of coming at you, right? Because I could have made the decision faster. I should have made the decision faster, or at least pivoted sooner. And that it wouldn't have led to like me shutting locations down. I had doubts prior to coming to Colorado about some of my team members. They turned out to be real. So it's like kind of trusting that gut instinct. So I learned that about myself too, that, if I think something or feel something, I really need to take a second and analyze that instead of brushing it off, because often my thoughts or gut feelings around those things are right. And at the end of the day, like if you're not failing, you're not trying, and you're not trying big enough things. And I think, even though that process was really, really hard, I really enjoyed everything I learned out of it. It's made me a better business owner, a better manager and mentor to my friends and my staff and just people in my life. And I would do it all over again. I don't think I would change anything.
Hmm. Man, that's such a good, thank you for being so honest and open about
Yeah.
that. I think that's a reality for a lot of people. That I know there's listeners that are working a job right now and previously owned a business and their identity was tied up in it.
Yeah.
And I know there's business owners that are struggling right now to make a decision and delaying
Yeah.
it. And the reality is you do have to trust your gut, and you also have to be comfortable failing,
Yeah.
and it's okay. And really not even seeing it as a failure, but just, a necessary ending.
Yeah.
Um,
Totally.
So
And it doesn't mean you can't try again. I know
exactly.
plenty of companies who have expanded too early, learned a lot of hard lessons, pulled out, and got their stuff together and figured it out again. And actually, Gino Wickman says this, and it's honestly the best piece of advice I've ever heard. You don't have to know what the right decision is. You just have to make one. You can always pivot later. And it's so true. I think a lot of us get stuck with feeling stuck in a rut, and then we become stuck in analysis paralysis. And then all of a sudden it's a year later and we're still feeling like we're stuck in a rut. It's because we haven't done anything.
Yeah. No, really good. Well, we're going to pivot the conversation a little bit, and let's start with just talking about, we're going to be talking about your software and maybe even getting into the weeds quite a bit on that. And I'm excited for it because I think this is an area of business that people really don't spend a ton of time on, or as much time on as you have.
Yeah.
And I want them to see kind of what the fruit of your labor has given you and potentially what it could give them.
Yeah.
So let's just start with, okay, you're in Colorado full-time now. What does the business look like today?
Yeah. So today we're a small team of 7, wearing many hats, and, we're full service design builds. So I have, one person who is my sales and lead designer. So she kind of walks, she attends consultations. Once clients sign into design, they enter into a pre-construction service agreement, and we go through the design process. So she's managing that all the way through to pretty much contract signing. Behind the scenes, either myself or one of my other team members are, doing all the estimating, trade walkthroughs on projects, demo and discovery if there's any concerns around hidden conditions. And then I have a finance manager who manages financial picture, all of our AR, AP, payroll, as well as she's a multi-talented individual. She drives the forklift, receives deliveries, orders materials, and just kind of manages the office and any sort of company events. So once a quarter, we're typically doing a volunteer event for an organization and a company team training and things like that. So she kind of manages that picture. I also have an admin assistant.
Did you find her at the CPA forklift convention?
Luckily, she was a team member already in place in Colorado, and I couldn't be happier because she was exactly what I was looking for in a financial person for a long time. Yeah, and we can definitely touch base more on that. On the field side of things, I have a production supervisor, which is essentially a project manager, and he takes projects from our sales to production turnover process, which is after a client signed the contract, all the way through to final completion of the project. And he's managing not only subcontractors, but our field carpenters as well. And on my right hand is my admin assistant. I have a virtual admin assistant who helps me keep all the software admin type things rolling, and social media as well.
You told me a funny fact about your virtual admin.
Yeah.
But I'll let you share it.
Yeah. So I was trying to figure out, I needed an admin assistant and I wanted someone who was good. And so I was I'll go on Upwork, and find someone. And so I went on Upwork and I stumbled across her profile, and it turns out she lives 5 minutes down the road from us, but I've never met her in person. I will finally meet her early next month. We're doing a trade and vendor appreciation event, and so we invited her to come in as well. And that'll be the first time myself and any of my team will meet her in over a year of working for us.
Wow. And she's 5 minutes down the road. That's great.
Yeah.
Real quick, because this is a topic with some of our listeners, how much of a lift was there for you when you hired an assistant?
It was immense. I think once you get to a certain size, there's so much administrative things, and I was still dealing, back when I hired her, I was also still going back and forth to Minnesota. So I had 2 locations, double the books, double the Secretary of State filings, everything. And I was getting to the point, I have a very good memory, and usually I can remember things just off the top of my head, no problem, down to our bank account and routing numbers. And I was getting to the point where I was lost. And so having her as a support, has probably saved me 40 hours a week, and she works a quarter of that time. And it's just because she's better at doing a lot of things than I am when it comes to building out our software or helping me get something implemented, making trainings and presentations. So I can then just go and focus on what really matters, which is training our staff. So I would say it's worth the investment because it's multiplying yourself by by 2 if you find the right one.
Yeah. No, that's great. Love to hear that. Okay. So that's where you are today.
Mhm.
Let's talk about technology. So your tech stack, all the suites of software that you have purchased and implemented inside your company. What are you using today?
Yeah, so we currently use Monday.com and Buildertrend are our primary 2 softwares that we use. We of
Okay.
course have QuickBooks as well for accounting, and then various other softwares for doing things like graphic design and Chief Architect and 2020 for internal like client design work.
Okay. Chief architect in what you said?
2020.
Okay. 2020.
Yeah.
And then what, you're also on, are you on Microsoft 365 or are you on Google Drive?
Google
Or
Drive.
Google Workspace?
Google Workspace.
Okay. Google Workspace. Okay. Great. And then where's your website?
Our website is hosted through Webflow, or it's created through Webflow.
Webflow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So you've got Webflow, and then any marketing software that you're using?
We use Vista Social for scheduling social media posts, Canva for
Okay.
designing social posts, and also internal and external facing documents.
Love it. Okay. So it's crazy how quickly they just like pile up. And I'm sure we're probably missing a handful still
Sure.
of just keep adding and adding and adding. And they're all monthly subscriptions primarily.
Yeah.
So, okay. But obviously the primary ones, QuickBooks accounting, I think most of our audience understands that. It ties in to what you do with Buildertrend. We understand Google Workspaces where you have all your files, your emails, your calendar, all that kind of stuff. Your website through Webflow. Okay. So we're going to focus a lot on Monday and Buildertrend, but I just want people to understand that your tech stack's a lot more than just your project management software and your CRM. It's actually quite extensive, and they don't have to all integrate together by any means. But certain aspects of them do have to integrate. Like your Buildertrend should integrate with your QuickBooks. And if you're not doing that, you're missing out on a lot, right?
Totally.
Okay. So why don't you share just your, why are you so comfortable with technology? Let's start with that. And why have you put such a priority on it?
Yeah. Technology plays a massive role in today's modern world in business, and you need it to multiply yourself, because if you didn't have the technology stack, like you're not going to meet the level of service that clients are looking for today. And I'll kind of use this as an example. Like it's funny timing. I had someone call me yesterday asking for advice that works at another design build firm, and they're in Washington, and this company's 116 years old. They've been around for a long time, and she is trying to figure out what they're going to do for their tech stack after 116 years, because they're on antiquated systems. And so she's trying to figure out, what the best things are. But like the biggest concern that she had was, do your employees use it? Like, are they involved in using it? And how does that work? And all these things. And it's like, well, yeah, they have to.
It's a good concern.
Yeah, it is a good concern. But the reality is if you aren't already on that bandwagon of utilizing technology, you're at least a decade behind in our industry. And it's only going to get worse. I mean, if you think about it, I have an original blueprint set from my personal first house that I remodeled from 1946. So in less than a lifetime, we've gone from hand drawing, architectural drawings and transferring them on a piece of paper with light, to now, like, we don't think twice about going into, our drawing software and making a change and spitting it out on a printer, or hanging a QR code on a job site for the electrician to pull up the plan set. Like, things at the rate at which things change is so fast, and you need the ability to be able to keep up, adapt, and stay ahead. That's my opinion.
Absolutely. Well, we'll talk about the employees as we go.
Yeah.
Because that's a massive part of actually using the software to make it work.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's focus on Monday and Buildertrend. How do you use Monday today?
Yeah. So I would describe Monday as our business management tool. Monday.com basically houses, so within it, if for people that aren't familiar, it has workspaces, and then within workspace, you can build things out. And so we have essentially a workspace for every department, from the VL Builders Way, which houses our all of our like employee resources for benefits and standard operating procedures and any sort of checklist or
It's like a company wiki.
yeah, exactly. And then we have a leadership workspace and a production workspace and a sales workspace, and then an internal admin owner workspace for managing our internal projects that we're doing or administrative tasks and things like that. And then we also use Monday as a CRM. So I built that out because Buildertrend was lacking like a client management system. Like I wanted the ability to be able to see where a client was at in any stage of the process. And I can do that once they're a project in Buildertrend by looking at their project schedule. But in the sales side, while Buildertrend had like activities and stuff like that, they had no great way of me just being able to get 1,000-foot view really fast. And so Monday has been able to bridge that gap for us and also bridge the gap of like reporting data. It's amazing to me how much construction softwares have not figured this issue out for us as remodelers or builders yet. Yeah. But I need reports if I want to make good decisions. I need data if I want to make good decisions. And so those were the like primary reasons for bringing Monday.com in. And then Buildertrend is our client and project management software. So we manage subcontractors and vendors in there, material selections, contracts, estimating, job costing, and anything else that falls down that line.
Okay. So I understand why you chose Buildertrend. And did you start with Buildertrend, or were you with Co-Construct was what they purchased?
Yeah, they purchased Co-Construct. I started with Buildertrend.
Started Buildertrend.
Yeah,
okay.
But I ended up like swapping softwares quite a bit in the beginning, trying to figure out what was going to work for us.
Okay. What were the other ones that you tried?
Yeah. So Job Nimbus was primarily like what I had switched to. So I started with Buildertrend, and I was like, this is way too complex and complicated. I don't need this.
Very complex and complicated.
Yeah. So then I went to Job Nimbus, and I used it, and it worked well, but I had no way to like schedule projects or like do a lot of things that also needed to happen. So after a year, we had grown so much and it just didn't work for us anymore. At least back then. I think they have a ton of different features now. And so we ended up switching back to Buildertrend after that.
Okay. Gotcha. And then with Monday.com, how did you land on that one? What other ones did you try?
Yeah. So Monday.com, it probably took me, I think 6 to 8 months to make a decision on it. So I looked at ClickUp, I looked at Notion, I looked at different project management softwares altogether just to see if there was one that could like bridge the gap, and none of them, hit the mark in every spot that I needed.
Okay. And so you decided on, and did Monday hit every single mark, or did you sacrifice a little bit?
If I remember correctly, we sacrificed a little bit, but we figured out workarounds within Monday to be able to, bridge those gaps anyways.
I think this is a really key point that I want to make to people. You went with Monday.com, which I would say traditionally is not a construction company's go-to software, usually used by more in-office jobs that are, on the computer all day, every day. And I think there's a lot of value in doing that, because if you go to these niche construction softwares, typically what you'll find is that the quality is just not very good in terms of user experience and design. Mm-hmm. And then the support level is not great. And whenever you go to something like Monday.com, although it does require a certain level of creativity and thought and, tweaking and trying things out, you can get a lot done and you can make something that is custom to you. Yeah. Is that what you found?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Monday, most of the softwares are like a blank canvas. The reality is if you buy project management software, it's also a blank canvas, but it's a limited blank canvas,
Exactly.
You can only build out the tools that they have available for you. And Monday is like open source compared to Buildertrend. So we were able to implement with outside things if we needed to, or push web links to it and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I think with the choice to go to Monday for the CRM, that's one that surprised me. because typically what we'll help people do is we actually separate CRM out, and we'll use with there. I'm really surprised, like you said, there is not a great CRM solution with great reporting and lead tracking and all the different things, especially on the marketing side for construction. It's just they're really subpar. But we use HubSpot for that for contractors, and we get it all the way to the point where it's, okay, we signed a contract. Okay, go into Buildertrend, go into Job Nimbus, Jobber, whatever it is that you're doing for the project management side. And you can actually, if you're doing some project management, you could probably do it in HubSpot, and we've helped people do that. But I do recommend doing what you're doing with Buildertrend at that level. So I love that you do have your CRM in the same place as all your departments inside of monday.com. I think there's a huge value in having those integrated because of the ability, because you're doing all of your workplace communication inside of there as well, right?
Exactly.
So we're chatting about projects, we're chatting about like leads. It's all in that one place, right?
Yeah, everything's in one place.
Yeah.
I've got a question for clarification. Monday.com, can you kind of think of it? It just gives you, your workspaces are a bunch of whiteboards, maybe?
Yeah.
And your CRMs, I mean, you're putting your workflows in there, your steps, your stages, reporting requirements, you build it out. And that sits over here in one part of Monday. Then you put your HR manual and your HR procedures in another, my mind says whiteboard, workspace.
Dashboard is probably a better term than whiteboard. But
well, there's actually some software one of my guys used called Whiteboard. It's great. But that's where my mind goes. But okay, just kind of understanding it's a place where you can create any sort or many sorts of processes.
Exactly.
And workflows.
Yeah. So we even have it to the level of we were running EOS in a different software. And my goal has always been to I want the least amount of softwares as possible with the most amount of transparency possible. And so we even worked on implementing, we found someone selling like an EOS template from Monday.com. And so I bought it, and then we took it like 5 steps further. So my staff even run their production meetings out of there. And I could look back at like 8 meetings ago and say, what did we cover this day? What were the issues we solved? What are the to-dos that came from it? And, what was the metrics that were reported on that day? So it's really all encompassing.
I think that's huge. And I think the template aspect that you don't get that with some of the construction softwares, and so being able to have a marketplace where you can find that specific template for that specific use case, and then even be able to tweak it from there. Do you find that, I know you mentioned you were looking into Notion a little bit. And my big rub with Notion was I actually use Notion personally. Like in my personal life, I have like grocery lists in there. I journal in there, take notes on different things, put books in there, stuff like that. But I feel like it's almost too much of a blank canvas. Like there's too little structure where it's like, you actually have to build the architecture of the structure versus like I use ClickUp personally for work, but it's very similar to Monday in a lot of respects.
Yeah.
There's some structure there that you can work within, and then, you get to tweak and build how you want.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I was looking for, because I'm no, software genius by any means. And so if I can't figure it out, there's no way my staff are going to figure it out. And I felt the same, like Notion. I think if I remember correctly, I did a trial of it, and like you open it, it's literally just blank, and you're like, oh,
it's literally blank.
What do I do from here?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But it's just as powerful as Monday and ClickUp.
Yeah, it really is. And ClickUp, Asana, I think it's called Asana, and Monday. They're all relatively the same. They just have different features, price points, and packages. I also needed something that I could get pretty into the weeds on, like user permissions and things like that for. So I think that's ultimately what led us to Monday.
That's great. Well, that's kind of the fun part, in my opinion. Maybe not for some people, but I enjoy looking at, okay, what is the software? Okay, how does it work? How can we set it up, the structure, all that stuff? But it's a whole nother thing to actually use the software on a day-to-day basis, and more importantly, get other people to use the software on a day-to-day basis. I always say that software is like 10% of the equation. 90% of it is human behavior
Totally.
and just getting people to have a habit of using the software. So what challenges did you run into? Was software the leading driver at the team when you bought the company? If it wasn't, how did you implement that culture of, hey, you're going to use the software or you're out of here? I mean, was that essentially what you said?
I mean, it's implemented and ingrained so deep into our processes that there's no choice. Like, you're either using it or you're not able to do your job. And that might sound a little sad, but we're that reliant on software. But it's kind of the reality of the world we live in. And if we lost it all tomorrow, we could certainly run our company without it because we have backup, processes and procedures for something like that. But essentially, I think, first it starts with, I'm going to kind of go back to what I said earlier about a core values fit, because when I was trying to implement like just Buildertrend alone in my Minnesota location, I was having a extremely hard time with getting some of my staff to do things like daily logs and just simple things. They just couldn't see the benefit of it. And here in Colorado, like, they were lacking processes and just kind of flying by the seat of their pants. So I had a team that was like eager to learn and implement some things, which was super helpful for me. But I think it's important when you roll out a software, you don't want to just like cram it on everyone all at the same time, right? Like, the reality is your staff are very busy. They're doing their jobs. They're trying to like focus on what's in front of them. They don't want to look to the side and say, oh, all right, I have to learn this now too. And, deal with these 3 clients over here and everything else. So I think it's important to have like a good rollout plan that discusses with the team, here's why we're doing this. Here's the future outcome of us doing this. And this is the direction we're going to go. It's okay if you don't love it, but you need to learn it and implement it. And so that's kind of like step 1. And then step 2 is making sure you provide the training and support that they need. So I think a lot of, especially small businesses are very slammed for time, and the owners, they're not trainers, they're business owners. They're just doing what they know best. And so I think it's important to, if you're not good at training, to have someone that's good at training and kind of like responsible for that, rolling that process out, and really just providing that support. So we typically start with like an in-person training, and then making sure that we're checking in with them and backing it up and supporting that training process until they're comfortable with using it.
Okay. So I'm always curious, and with Monday.com, there's probably not an onboarding that you can do with Monday. Maybe there is. I'm sure you could find a Monday.com expert, but you did it all yourself, right?
Yeah. So it was,
and probably YouTube videos, stuff like that, but you did it all yourself primarily?
Yeah. I would say like I'm tech savvy to the point where I learn by physically doing. So both with Buildertrend and Monday, the first thing I do is I spend a bunch of time in there myself figuring out what its capabilities are, testing and breaking things, and and I'm trying different things and kind of seeing how I wanted it laid out. But really, my admin assistant was super helpful for building most of Monday.com out. So I communicated to her what I wanted. She would research and figure out like, here's all the ways we can do it. Which way do you want to go? And then she would work on building it out.
Okay, fantastic. Now on the Buildertrend side, I know there's onboarding that they provide. Maybe you pay for it. What was it like actually implementing that? Because it is a complex software and it's not necessarily intuitive from the first glance.
Yeah, totally. So you're right. All those companies definitely offer like an onboarding, but I'm going to reiterate your comment you said earlier that they also don't have the best support. Like Buildertrend's also a blank slate when you start with it. You can't just go in there and start estimating if you don't have something that you've built out for estimating. It just doesn't work that way. So when I first started with Buildertrend, we had to pick the features that were most important to us for the size and team that we were at the time. And then I spent essentially a period of 2 years like building that out and then training my staff. And then when I came to Colorado, like Buildertrend does have a paid training feature you can use where they help you with systems and process and rolling that out. And so we had Buildertrend built out to a point where it was like ready to use across both locations. And we paid for that. And they came out and they documented everything that we did. And then rolled it into like an SOP doc. And then anytime a staff member had a problem with like how we did something, like Buildertrend had that on record. And so they could then train my staff for it. So it's just kind of like figuring out like what
does that cost? I'm just curious what that costs.
I think it was like 12 grand. It was
12 grand. And is that just like a one time, or are you paying it every year?
No, it's a one time. Of course, if you change from the like operating procedures and things like that, if I remember correctly, they call it like on-site consulting or something like that. And basically it's a period of a few months where they kind of get to learn what your business does. They'll help you build some things out. It's kind of amazing though to see how many Buildertrend employees don't know their software as well as I do. So,
I had the exact same issue. Yes. We helped a roofing company get set up on Buildertrend, and there was it's been 4 years now. I don't remember the exact instance, but there was something that was going on, and then employers like, where are you? Like they didn't. So the support was lackluster.
Yeah. And they've gotten better, but it's like, we had them fly out here for training. So all my staff was here, and we basically spent, if I remember correctly, like 2 days going through every spot within Buildertrend. I'd say it's definitely helpful for like reinforcing the use of it and getting people comfortable. But a long-term training plan would be much better. So what I do now is record how we use specific things and wrap them into a video. And then we host those videos on an online course host management platform for e-learning.
Great.
Yeah.
I honestly, I think it's less about how you've approached building out the software and, structuring it to your company, and more about how you've supported your employees in training them. That's been the biggest lever for you. And I see that too many times with people. They buy the software. It's going to be this wonderful solution for us. Maybe they spend the time to implement it and get all of their stuff into the software. But then the training is like, okay, here you go.
Yeah.
And they don't get the response they're looking for, and then they're frustrated at the software, when in reality they haven't really set their team up for success.
Yes, exactly. And that's what it comes down to, right? Like, your employees don't want a hard job. They don't want to have a hard life.
Yeah.
So if this software truly makes their life easier, like, they're going to want to do it, but you have to show them the way and support them through that journey. And eventually it'll catch on. And secondly, I think you have to be really organized the first time you lay out a major software change. It's like training. Like, if you hosted an all-day company training, which we happen to do once a quarter, but I put a big emphasis around you want it to be structured and organized and well laid out, because if within the first 10 minutes of having everyone in the room, they feel like this is a waste of time, they've automatically tuned out. You're not really going to get through to them as well. So I think putting a lot of thought and care into that implementation process and training process is extremely huge.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to go through the practical application of how the software actually works, and really show how much leverage you have because of your software.
Yep.
So let's just start with the entire process. Someone calls and says, hey, I want you to remodel my house. What happens?
Yeah. So whether it's call or email, we have tracking links set up with our phone number and email and PPC and things like that. So if someone submits through our website or they call through the phone, a lead's automatically created in Data.com, which instantly sends out an introduction email of our company with some information. It also lets them know that we're going to be calling them, pretty much right away. We're a small team, so we try to call leads every morning, and every afternoon is typically our process. So basically, we'll call and have that like initial qualifying phone call with the client. And within Monday.com, we have all these fields built out for the information that we need, such as address and things like that. But we also have script templates. So if someone was brand new to calling and qualifying leads and they'd never done it before, they'd at least have a good idea of what questions they need to ask and the information they should be getting. So all that information's entered. That lead card is then moved from lead qualifying to consultation scheduled or follow-up if they, weren't able to be reached. Within Monday, if we weren't able to reach leads, we can send out follow-up emails. We could also pre-schedule those or have them as automations that send out. Once a lead is, through the follow-up process and they're scheduled into a consultation, essentially all the notes for that client are being taken and uploaded into the project card within Monday. And that's moved to what we call prep for PSA, where we create a pre-construction service agreement and a budget. Now that we do outside of Monday. So we use Buildertrend for the pre-construction service contract, and we use
So they can sign it.
yeah. And we use a Google Sheets file that I created for budget setting. Eventually we'll likely change that, but for now that's how that works.
So how does that work?
Yeah.
So the budget, what do you do inside of the Google Sheet?
Yeah. So inside the Google Sheet, it's basically like it's our estimating process from Buildertrend put into an Excel spreadsheet that automatically adds contingencies and provides us ranges for initially setting that project budget.
So you've got formulas in there that are calculating, a range for different items. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you use that to basically create a budget for the client.
Yeah.
And then give them a range.
Yeah. And I missed the software. So during the consultation process, our staff has Render on their phones, which, is
what is it called?
Render.
Okay.
And basically they scan the space and automatically, creates a floor plan within like 90 seconds. It gives you wall elevations and all that. So when I'm creating budgets, something that we have a heavy focus on, and we're likely operate a little different than other companies in this, is we do invest some time in the front to make sure we're setting the project up for success. And so we upload that render scan into Buildertrend. I do a takeoff on it to get square footages and things like that. And we're using that to build out that budget template. So it's as accurate as possible with the information we know.
And so why is your philosophy on that? Is that just to be of better service to the client, your higher end customers? You want to give a better experience and a more realistic budget?
Yeah. It's also one of the number one complaints I hear in our industry is, they said it was going to roughly cost this and it came out to be 40 grand higher. And I'll never say we haven't been there. Like, yeah, we've done that. But it also gives us a clearly outlined document that once we're through the design process, and if that budget's 40 grand higher, we have something to reference and say, oh yeah, this wasn't included in the original scope. You added this, this, and this, so I can at least explain the scope
justify
to them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also
Gotcha.
sets a roadmap for the design team as well for selection allowances and things like that. So if the design team doesn't know what they're designing, they're going to over design it or overspend. So it helps everyone just kind of have clarity within that process.
Okay. So let's just recap so far. Out of all the things that you've gone through, where are the automations? You have the automatic addition into the CRM from the form submission or the phone call. You also have the automatic email sent to the lead of that they will receive a phone call. What else is automated in that in your process?
Yeah. So once they go through a consult and a pre-construction service presentation, we have a follow-up process. So we have a 3, 5, 10, 15 day process, and we can tweak it, but we have automated emails set up to go out at certain points within that process as well. It's basically a template. You can modify the email to essentially, be a little more personalized to the client, and schedule send that.
Okay, excellent. And then is there any automation of like creating the budget sheet automatically from a template or the PSA from like, hey, as soon as there's a lead that we move to this stage, a PSA is automatically created?
So not necessarily automated in that sense. We do have a pre-construction template, service agreement template in Buildertrend. The one unfortunate side is Buildertrend is like owning an iPhone. It's closed source.
Yeah, it doesn't integrate.
Yeah,
it doesn't integrate with Monday.
They could just open it up so I could use Zapier. I would have everything I'd ever want. And yeah, so that's the one downfall. So those are still very much non-automated processes. The budget sheet is actually something that I want to create someday if we don't find a software within 15 years that does it for us. But that's actually one of our next steps, is essentially automating some formulas within there that makes that process much smoother, quicker, and easier.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so we've got our PSA signed at this point from the customer, we'll say, and they can do that. You send them a link, they sign the PSA,
Yep.
they've approved the budget. Where are we at now in our software?
Yeah. So from there, we move the lead file within Monday.com to stage 2, which is another board. And that kicks off a series of emails. It lets our finance manager know that she needs to send them an invoice if she doesn't know that already. And then it sends like a recap and next steps email with the clients to start scheduling dates for selections and things like that. From there, we're mostly working outside of Monday in the sense of like we're doing a site measure, drafting and chief architect, doing selections meetings in person and things like that. Once we get through selections, we're uploading selections in Buildertrend. That's another template that we have built out to make life easier. We still have to input a lot of information. But what the template helps is in the design build world where we're doing high-end and large-scale projects, there are 1,000 things you need to remember to select, down to route caulk and door stoppers and things that you just wouldn't normally think about. So it's like a checklist in its own means for that process.
So after you've gone through the sales process, they move to a new pipeline that's essentially for project setup. And from there, you're getting it set up in the financial side where you're getting all their details entered into QuickBooks and you're sending over that initial invoice. You're doing your measurements. You're working inside of Chief Architect, getting the selections done inside of Buildertrend. And are these just like tasks inside of Monday.com, but they're working in other softwares, or they're not even really listed as tasks for people to do inside of Monday?
So we use Kanban boards within Monday as like steps within our process. So at each point, so like once a client signs a PSA and it moves into the new design pipeline board, we have all the steps within our process in a linear line. So the first step is a site measure. So the lead card moves to site measure. Once that's completed, the person responsible for that moves that to as-built and prelim drawings. Once that's done, it moves to selections. And then once selections is done, it moves to grade walkthrough. And then once it's done there, it moves to estimating. And so it's just following that process throughout the line. And we set it up that way for reporting.
At what point are you jumping over to Buildertrend and out of Monday?
So
I mean, eventually it jumps over to different system.
Once we hit estimating or selections and estimating, that's mostly when we start using Buildertrend. Now, Monday never necessarily leaves the equation because from there, that's why I said it's a business management tool. So, once we get through the estimating and signed contract phase, it goes into project management board. And basically from there, it's just tracking that we did a sales to production turnover meeting. We did a pre-construction meeting with partner dust letters, and then it's tracking the cycle time of the project. So while it's a board for us to be able to see where anything's at in a given process, it's tracking the data for how long was this personal lead before we close them into design, and how long did this design cycle time take, and what kind of project was it, and how long did this project take from pre-job planning phase to start the build phase, and all these things. So it's working together with us. If it makes sense.
So it's working together in tandem with Buildertrend. A lot of those things you at a lower level, I'm assuming you would still be able to do inside of Buildertrend, where you can do your daily logs and activities and have those templated out. And you probably still have some of that, but you're not getting it as tailored and as detailed probably, and easier to find and navigate to as you would in Monday.com. Is that right?
That's exactly it. Yeah. And the reality is yes, I could definitely find most of the information for this within Buildertrend, but I would have to search through it on an individual project basis, write it down. I got so sick of spending hours doing those things. And now Monday will send me an automatic report every Monday if I want it, and just give it to me.
Can I ask a question? Two questions. One, does Buildertrend have Kanban cards? And number two, is Monday going to Buildertrend and collecting this information and
No, so
bringing it
there's a
back?
level of double entry here, is what I was basically saying,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, but it's minimal in the sense of like we figured out where to like enter things into Monday, and then once we create the job in Buildertrend, really the only things we're entering back into Monday is, you know, like the contract amount and our job costs and some things that we want for data points. But really everything from there, as far as communication, daily logs and things like that, are pretty much tracked in Buildertrend. So I would say that Monday works
Yeah.
for sales, Buildertrend works for operations and project management mostly.
Yeah, but operations is still in Monday, correct?
Yeah.
Like they're still getting in there, chatting, adding comments, whatever
Nope.
it is.
At that point,
Oh, okay.
the operations manager, all he is doing is moving the project card to the different steps within the process, and that's all they
So-
use that for.
So really the operations team's not doing data entry at all inside of Monday. All they're doing is dragging and updating the stages, giving a status update essentially.
Exactly.
And then all the details are inside of Buildertrend.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. From we
right.
wanted something to be able to track like lead cycle times. That's something that Builder or project cycle times, and number of warranty claims received a year and like things like that. Those are all things that
Yeah.
Buildertrend can't report on. Are things like that.
Yeah. It's a shame.
Mhm.
So we've got about 10 more minutes left.
Yeah.
And as we wrap this up, I really want to understand like all the different things that because like we mentioned before, Buildertrend is very complex and there's a barrier to entry and to really using it at its fullest because it takes such a heavy lift to learn and implement.
Yeah.
But I would say most people, when they're using Buildertrend, they're using it to get contracts signed, to do maybe some daily logs, and maybe pay subcontractors.
Yeah.
Those are probably the biggest things at the front end. Am I missing anything that are like fairly easy that people use it for?
Likely estimating. I mean,
Estimating,
Yeah.
yes, correct. As a part of the collecting signatures, you send the estimate, get the signatures, right? So what outside of those things, I think most people that are in Buildertrend are aware of what Buildertrend is. They know those functions. What are the things that you're going above and beyond on in Buildertrend that people maybe aren't maximizing?
Yeah. So I would say takeoffs is for sure one of those things. And
Okay.
we haven't gone down this rabbit hole yet, but something that takeoffs can do is you can build takeoff templates, which then feed the estimate. So as you're doing takeoffs for things like quantities of trim and drywall square foot and things like that, if you're estimating set up to use proper cost codes with a cost catalog and unit costs, you can feed those into your estimate. So it's not doing double entry or a double step in a task then.
Yeah. And that's a pretty big lift to get all that stuff inside of Buildertrend, correct?
Yeah, it is. It definitely takes some time. You need to understand how job costing works. And that's really like the number one thing that Buildertrend is, at least for me as a business owner, is job costing. Yes, we run schedules out of it and we have client portals and they get to see daily logs and stuff like that. But job costing is like the number one thing it is for me, at least.
Can you walk us through, if that's the number one thing, can you walk us through what you're able to gather from Buildertrend for the job costing aspect?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say the number one thing is like real-time data. I can look at any given project that I want, no matter where it's at within the stage of the process, and see, are we over budget in any categories, under budget? And same thing for my project manager, who is luckily for me, like very cost focused on projects. Like he's using the budget tab and the purchase order system, daily, making sure that things are entered. But the reality is that job costing is only as good as like your estimating process. And so it kind of starts there within Buildertrend, where I have an extra step of complications because we have W-2 staff who are, physically working on projects as well as subcontractors. And so I had to build a system that I could estimate and predict unit costs for physical work that's being done on site by humans who, naturally have bad days and mess things up and things like that. And then I needed to create a system that I could time track against those things and understand, are we spending too much time, or, are we underestimating this category, or is it good? And then from there, you need to be able to read that data. So job costing, time clock, and the budget tab and purchase orders kind of like all work hand in hand.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
think,
you're just real quickly on the job costing, a subject dear to my heart. You're doing that. One, does it communicate eventually to job costing, or just lump sums over to QuickBooks? That would be one question. And two, are you entering costs based on POs or actual costs? And your labor, I think you were talking about that. You have to divide that amongst all the jobs. Who's doing that? I mean, that gets pretty complex at some point.
Actually,
Sounds like
it actually doesn't. So to answer your question, we use like the Craftsman Book Company unit cost estimating system is basically what I have in Buildertrend. I spent time to build that catalog out specifically for us. So you have your cost codes, which would be like demolition labor, framing materials, all those things, and they're all separated out. So first up was figuring out like, what are the categories we need? And then we uploaded, a cost book that ties to each of those cost codes. So, if we're framing a certain amount of linear foot of wall, or hanging a certain amount of square foot of drywall, or whatever it is that I have in-house labor for, those things are a unit cost, and it's based project, and we're adjusting those up. So those all feed into QuickBooks as like one cost. And so that's why you still need Buildertrend, because Buildertrend has the budget tab, which is where you essentially read the project's budget. And so it'll take all those line items and group it into, a category essentially. So framing labor, let's say. From there, if we're doing things internally, we have our burdened rate for our staff entered into Buildertrend, and they're using that Buildertrend time clock, and they're clocking into the line item that they're doing for the day. So if they're framing, they're clocking into framing labor. That is then tracking in Buildertrend for that specific job against that line item. And it tells me, in real time, if I had 5 guys clocked in it over the course of 2 weeks for different hours, like it'll tell me the individual time and the overall time and the money we spent for that. If we're using subs, the PO system is what comes in for them. So at the beginning of the project, when we're estimating the project, we send out bids through the bid system in Buildertrend. We then enter that bid into the estimate, and then that gets turned into a purchase order, and then it's tracked against for bills. So essentially the project manager is creating the purchase order and sending it to the subcontractor, and that subcontractor approves that. And then as payments are made by our finance manager, she's going in and tracking the payment amounts in that purchase order until it's paid in full and approved. And then,
do you just a quick question? Do you do accurate work in process,
like a whipped report? So that's the
Yep.
reason that we started getting into like Monday. That was one of the reasons we started getting into Monday, is because Buildertrend's reporting is terrible. That's just the reality. Like I could go into my whip report today and it wouldn't tell me anything I need to know, and it's inaccurate.
So few people use whip or use it correctly, and all I can say is you never ever know. Your financials are not correct.
Yes,
they just aren't.
No, they're not. Especially the construction company. And the second problem with that is most accountants don't even understand what our reporting procedures need to be.
Well, our mutual friend Alex, who introduced us to you, has a very accurate has whip reporting that was sufficient for bonding companies. And when you're doing that now, they want to know what you should want to know.
Totally.
And it's great.
So I actually have we haven't fully solved that problem yet. So what I currently have is a financial sheet that I created with Google Sheets. And I get a cash report every week. So my cash reports are in there. It tells me, amount we collected, our outlays for overhead, our outlays for job costs, actual cash balance. That automatically calculates our net and gross burn rates and gives me a cash runway for, giving me an idea of like how much cash we have on hand. I also have essentially a overhead and markup sheet that I would say I created for projecting what we're trying to do for the year. So it has all the line items that are on my chart of accounts. So like accounting, software, salary for office, salary for product management, salary for sales, like all the expenses that we would have from an overhead standpoint get entered in there and forecasted as a budget. And then we track against that month over month in that sheet. And it tells me if we're using too much or not enough of that budget, if we're off. And then I also enter like our projected revenue in there, and it gives me what we should be marking things up based on our desired net profit and anticipated job costs, and a whole bunch of like other information.
Wow, it's brilliant.
Yeah. And
we need to have another podcast session here.
Well, and I knew this would happen, but I think the message that I really want to get across here is that you, just from what you've described, you have a leverage that a lot of contractors do not have against the competition. And it's only going to continue to compound over time. Right? Because you have this in place.
Yeah. And I've taken a different approach, right? Like my first couple years in business, I never knew where I was going to go, right? Like when I started this, it wasn't anticipated. When I did start, all of a sudden I went, I think like my first 6 months in business, we did like 150,000. My first full year, we did $500,000. My second full year, we were over $1 million. And at that point, like I was just hiring people and trying to get them in to work alongside me and get things done. And what I learned is like, you have to have systems for growth. And now, we've been at a similar revenue level of, what I was doing 3 years ago for the last 3 years. But I have so many systems and this great foundation that when I'm ready to pull the trigger, like growth will be a breeze for us from here on out.
Yeah. It's truly scalable.
Exactly. And that's what I'm looking
truly
for.
Scalable. Well, Victor, this has been awesome, man. I really appreciate you being so open and for being so thorough and explaining things. We're cutting it probably shorter than we should. We'll have to have you back. But there's so much that I think people can gain from this, and just an understanding of what's possible and what's required to be able to get there, I think is really valuable. So thanks for being like a real life case of how this actually works for our audience.
Of course.
But we'll hope to have you on again soon.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me. There's so much we could talk about here, but overall, great conversation. I think not enough podcasts, especially in our industry, talk about these things. So it's been really nice to come on and actually be real with, what we're doing.
We will do it again. I guarantee, especially on the looking to buy a company or looking to sell a company and all the issues and the pricing and how did you do it and how did you pay them. Everybody's interested in that.
Sure.
At least they say they are. So,
okay. Well, take care, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into the Cash Flow Contractor. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Visit thecashflowcontractor.com. See you next episode.